blurted out, "You?" Hua Chang humped coldly and ignored him. As for Lan Chang, the moment she saw them, she turned to bolt. Fu Yao noticed and whipped around. "Stop right there," he shouted. He hadn't yet stepped out when a long white silk band flew out and strapped her ankle. Lan Chang immediately tumbled to the ground, hugging her belly as she flipped over. It seemed that the fetus spirit was hidden in her belly again. Shilin said as he pulled Roya back, "If you wanted her to stop, you should have done this. Just shouting is pointless. By the way, you were talking about your general earlier. What's happened to him?" Fu Yao didn't respond. He humphed and went up to seize Lan Chang's arm, looking like he was really furious now. Not only did he forcefully grab a woman, his action unforgiving and hard, but he actually cursed earlier. This was not the Fu Yao they knew from before. Yet, unexpectedly, before he was able to pull Lan Chang up, her belly suddenly swelled up like a balloon, and a white figure shot out and shrieked as it lunged at Fu Yao's face. It was the fetus spirit. Every time it returned to its mother's womb, it would save up another round of energy. Thus, the strike was treacherous, and Fu Yao had to focus to fight it, whipping up his hand to smack. That fetus spirit was beaten back like a ball and hit the wall with a loud bang. Then it shot toward Shelian. "Catch it! Don't let it run away," Fu Yao shouted. Before Shelian had even moved, Hua Chang was already shielding in front of him. That ball-like fetus spirit braked abruptly in front of him and charged at Fu Yao once again. This ghost ball was ricocheting and rampaging about the upstairs corridor, but it was also complete mayhem downstairs. They could hear down below the cries of those attendants begging for mercy. "My lords, please be magnanimous. Us lowly ones are also only doing this for a bite to eat. Yeah, we won't do this anymore. Truth be told, at most, we'd only steal some chickens nearby to eat. It's all that green old master who forced us to be his underlings that we did this. He's in the kitchen right now." Seeing that the situation had now fallen into complete chaos, Shilin suddenly remembered something and leapt down from the second floor. Chirong was in the kitchen, his legs crossed, picking at his teeth cheerfully while waiting for his meal to serve themselves. Suddenly, there was a loud rumbling sound. A figure had kicked through the wall and leapt in aggressively. "Chirong, where's Guzi?" he shouted. This classic martial god entrance shocked Chirong to his feet. "You?" he shouted. "Why are you here? Can't you knock like a normal person?" Without missing a beat, Shilin went up and smacked him down, pressing him over the top of the chopping board like a duck. "Cut the nonsense," he shouted. "What did you do to the child?" Chirong grinned, a smile full of teeth. He giggled. "Look, isn't the ground piled with them?" What was the ground piled with? Human bones. Fury blazed in Shelian's heart, and he squeezed harder with force. Chirong then started wailing and howling. "Ow, ow, ow! My arm! My arm's broken! Broken! Cousin Crown Prince, wait! Okay. I'll be honest. I lied. I didn't eat him. I didn't. I was going to, but I haven't yet." "Where is he now?" Shelian demanded. Stop crushing, Chirong shouted. "I'll tell you, that little feet dragger is locked up in the shed on the side. Just take a look and you'll see." Shelian ordered Roya to bind Chirong and opened a small door on the side of the kitchen. Sure enough, Guzi was curled up inside. Shelian felt his breath under his nose and his breathing was steady. His little face was red and flushed, looking to be sound asleep. However, when Shelian lifted the child up, He could feel that the child's body was hot to the touch, like he was feverish, and Shelian's heart tensed. Just then, those monks and cultivators poured in too. The moment they entered the kitchen, they stepped on that ground piled with human bones and almost slipped. The scene was shocking and horrifying, and they all cried out, "Huh? It's a shady establishment. So all those dishes outside, they're all made of human flesh." I told you, I've never seen chicken feet that long. Right at the same time, there was another loud rumbling, and a new hole was punched through the ceiling, a white ball crashing down. "What's that?" the mob cried. Soon after, Fuyao jumped down from that hole too, hurling out over 10 yellow talismans from one swing of his hand, yelling, "Get lost! Don't get in the way of my work." "Ah, it's the skilled master," the mob cried. Then Lan Chang dragged herself and rolled down too. "Stop hitting him," she yelled. "Wah, a woman," the mob cried again. Those yellow talismans were shooting like iron nails, like flying blades, and while Shelian dodged with just a slight shift of his body, Chirong couldn't get away, and they all stabbed squarely onto his back. He wailed pathetically, "Ghost murder." The mob swarmed over and gathered around him to examine the talismans, gasping in awe. "Wow, what incredible skill in shooting talismans," they said. The good old kitchen was suddenly squished and crowded, loud and noisy. Fuyao was chasing that fetus spirit, leaping up and down. Lan Chang was chasing after Fuyao like she had gone mad. Half of Chirong's face changed shape by the way Shelian was pressing him down on the chopping board, his back turning into a target for those yellow talismans that Fuyao hurled while being observed by a crowd, and Lan Chang would step on him from time to time. He lamented pathetically, "Why? Why are there so many people? Who are you? Who are you? And who are you? Is no one gonna let me eat? Why is it always like this no matter where I go? What do you all have against me?" As he wailed, his eyes spun and saw through the collapsed wall of the kitchen to the outside of the inn. Hua Chang looked like he hadn't noticed the mayhem inside and was sitting calmly under a tree with enough leisure to build a golden foil palace. Who knew how long he'd been playing around, but before him there was already a sumptuous little mansion made of over 10 gold foils. Chirong instantly changed his tune and yelled at the top of his lungs, "Everyone look outside! Quick! The crimson rain sword flower turned into a brand. If you hold grudges against him, go now. Don't miss this chance. If you pass through this village, there won't be another shop." But before he finished, a chilling, glistening bloody butcher knife was thrust into his mouth between his teeth. The handle of the butcher knife was gripped in Shelian's hand. Shelian smiled. He said. "What are you yelling about?" Chirong did not see how Shelian was able to thrust that knife into his mouth. He could only feel the chill on his lips, and the tip of his tongue sensed that there was a sudden, new, extremely sharp object. Although he wasn't hurt, if he tried moving even an inch, his mouth was going to bleed, and his voice died in his throat. However, the crowd had already seen Hua Chang, who was stacking a golden foil palace far outside the inn. "Is that him?" they asked. "Probably." With Guzi in one arm and pulling Roya with the other, Shelian dashed out to get there before the others. Chirong was still bound by Roya, and he shrieked as he was dragged along the ground. "Shelian, you dog fucker! You must be doing this on purpose. I've never seen anyone as evil as you. You fake White Lotus. Ah!" The mob gathered round. "Do we charge?" they asked. "Watch out for trickery. How about we observe first?" Right at the He Chang finished building the little golden palace, and he rose to his feet. He raised his brows as he side-eyed the little building he constructed and gently kicked. Flop, 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 the golden palace collapsed, and that inn also rumbled as it crumbled. The illusion was broken. Shilian turned back and looked, and behind wasn't some inn, but a collapsed little cottage, the kind that was normal in barren hills such as this. The inn earlier was created by an illusionment spell. The crowd of monks and cultivators who hadn't yet decided whether to charge out were all crushed under, knocked out by rotten logs and ragged straw. Shilian jogged to He Chang's side. "San Lang, won't using powers like this affect you?" he asked. He Chang waved his hand composedly, and those gold foils all disappeared into thin air. "Don't worry, Gaga. Something small like this is nothing," he said. Just then, a piece of a broken roof moved, and Fu Yao poked out. He pushed a batch of hay away, exclaiming angrily, "You're not bothered. I'm bothered." He had finally captured that fetus spirit, yet his vision suddenly went dark. When he looked up, that rotten roof was splitting and caving in, crumbling right on top of him. What a disaster. Fu Yao plucked a piece of straw from his hair and stomped out before Shilian and He Chang, glaring at the He Chang who was shorter than him for the moment. He raged, You did this on purpose." He Chang blinked but didn't rebuke. But he didn't taunt either, only raising his inky black eyes to look at Shilian. Shilian immediately dropped his arm, grasped his shoulder, and pulled him behind his person. No, surely not. Kids do not know how to control themselves. So sorry, Fu Yao." Fu Yao watched him in disbelief, with his head full of messed up hair. "Kids?" he asked. "Your Highness, do you really think I'm so blind as to not recognize who this is?" Shilian replied innocently, "Little kid." Fu Yao stared at He Chang and narrowed his eyes, but then behind him came faint, creaking sounds. It seemed Lan Chang had also pushed up a piece of roof and crawled out. Fu Yao turned back to her. Shilian sighed a breath of relief, putting Guzi on the ground, but as he was doing so, a hesitant voice rang in his ears. "Your Highness?" it asked. Shilian immediately straightened up. "Feng Xin?" he asked. It really was Feng Xin on the other end, and it sounded like he also sighed in relief. "Thank goodness," he said. "Your verbal password hasn't changed after all." Shilian soundlessly gave a dry laugh. 800 years ago, when he activated the verbal password for the first time, it was, "Just recite the Ethics Sutra 1,000 times." Even 800 years later, it had never changed, and Feng Xin actually remembered. Shilian remembered the way Feng Xin laughed until he was hoarse when he first heard that verbal password all those years back, and couldn't help but feel nostalgic, even though it wasn't the right time. "Yes, it hasn't changed," Shilian said. "How is it in the upper court? Is the Heavenly Emperor informed of the affair with Ling Wen?" He Chang heard that he was talking to a heavenly official of the upper court and consciously stepped away, placing his hand on Guzi's forehead to check if he was sick. On the side, Feng Xin's voice grew serious. "It's not good. He knows. The entire upper court is in chaos right now." Shilian sighed and said, "All the coordination and arrangement of the upper court affairs has always been managed by Ling Wen. So it couldn't be helped. Could no other civil guards take her place?" "They have, but they're not effective," Feng Xin said. "Usually, they're the most diligent in scorning the palace of Ling Wen, like they could do the job way better if they had the position. Now that we need them to take up the task, not a single one can do even half of what she does. Just the organization and management of news and information alone made them dizzy. A number of civil guards all dropped and declined the position. Shilian shook his head and Fengxin added, and not just Lingwen, but something happened to Mu Qing as well. He was locked up at first, but he beat up the injured guarding official and escaped. What? Shilian shouted. Hearing this, on impulse, he instantly looked to Fu Yao. That black-clad youth was just saying something to Lan Chang, and while there was displeasure on his face, there was more disquiet. Shilian walked further away and lowered his voice. What happened to Mu Qing? He asked. How did it come to this? He wasn't just locked up. The entire palace of Xuanzhen has been suspended, awaiting investigation, Fengxin replied. It was all because of that fetus spirit. Shilian's voice grew softer. What happened with the fetus spirit? Was he really related to the case? Fengxin said. All the demons and monsters sealed everywhere have escaped this time. Mu Qing was responsible for the female ghost Lan Chang and that fetus spirit, but he didn't manage to capture them, letting them get away. But during the pursuit, the fetus had pointedly recognized Mu Qing. It said the one who carved it from its mother's womb and molded it into a little ghost was Mu Qing. That's impossible, Shilian blurted out. No way, even though Mu Qing is someone. Well, he had no reason to do something like this. Who knows, Fengxin said, but apparently there's a wicked cultivation method involving the use of dead babies to accelerate ascension. Now, there's a number of people suspecting whether his ascension was also problematic, so they planned to lock him up first before taking their time to thoroughly investigate all past actions. Yet who knew he couldn't sit still and ran away himself? Now everyone believes he's guilty and escaped because of the crime. Wait, Shilian said. This really isn't right. If Mu Qing was a perpetrator, then why didn't that fetus spirit and Lan Chang recognize him at the great martial hall at first and had to accuse him during capture? Isn't this very obviously slander? By the time I found out, things had already progressed to this point, so I'm not sure what's really happened either, Fengxin replied. It seems Lan Chang and the fetus spirit didn't know who the spellcaster was either, but when the little ghost was first molded and emerged, it had a random moment of clarity, broke free of control, and left a scar on that individual. When that fetus spirit was fighting with Mu Qing, it saw there was also a bite mark on Mu Qing's arm, and it was an old wound of hundreds of years. Did this bite mark match the teeth of that fetus spirit? Shilian asked. A complete match, Fengxin said. And how did Mu Qing explain the scar? Shilian asked solemnly. He's admitted that he'd seen the fetus spirit before, Fengxin said, but he doesn't admit himself to be the perpetrator. He states that he saved that fetus spirit out of benevolence, but was bitten by it. A confession like this, he might as well not have tried to explain anything. That was true only because helping out of kindness, loving and protecting children, doing good without leaving a name, in everyone's minds, these were all things Mu Qing would never do. Mu Qing had always been lonesome. He had never shown any unnecessary kindness, and he didn't really make any intimate friends in the heavens. Now that something had happened, no one would believe him, even if he tried to argue, and naturally, there was no one to speak on his behalf. This was probably why he chose to run away and investigate the truth himself. Things are still out of control here, Your Highness, Fengxin said. Where are you? The Heavenly Emperor said the gathering of ghosts is probably unstoppable by now. hurry back and join the assembly. I'm currently, Shilin started to say. But before he continued, Fuya's cold voice suddenly sounded from behind him. Who are you talking to?